This week, we're joined by the brilliant Roger Herney, founder of Off Madison Avenue in Arizona, an agency he's been running for nearly 27 years, which impressed me. Roger's background sits at the crossroads of creative, behavioral science, and behavioral economics, which he blends into something he calls behavioral marketing. He is the author of Outthink, Outperform, and he's just come off the TEDx stage in Kuala Lumpur. And then, of course, we get into the mistakes. Roger shares that one toxic hire that almost cost him his agency staff and new business, and the expensive lesson he learned trying to build his own enterprise AI when he should have just been renting one. It's a cracking conversation about thinking better rather than faster. So, let's get into it. Enjoy! Roger Herney, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Chris, and well, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, good to have you.
I mean, a bit unusual to have you on the show. I mean, we've met you. We've probably known you just over a year now. You're the way that we met is through WorldCom, and you've got an agency in the US, right? So do you want to? And I didn't realize this till I did a bit of research, but you've been running that agency for more than 27 years. I'm sat here going, I'm running a PR agency in the UK for like. I mean, I'm great. I mean, look at Will and me, and our hair, it's all going grey. 16 years.
It's a shocker.
Nearly. So 27 years, that's impressive.
Well, technically 27 years this October, so we're under 27.
Okay.
And I started the agency when I was 12, so do the math, you know.
And so you specialize in behavioral science. Is that what your agency does, or is that just what you do? Or does the two shall meet?
No, those two are very intertwined. So I have a background, not just in creative, but behavioral science and behavioral economics. And the combination of those two things creates a category called behavioral marketing that is the foundation for Off Madison Ave and the work that we do here, where we look at which audiences through very specific behavioral archetypes have the greatest degree of motivation to shift and change behavior in our client's favor. And then how do we shift that behavior through tapping into that motivation?
So one thing I'm interested to know, as Chris said, we've discussed behavioral science and so on the podcast a fair bit, largely from a UK perspective. And one of the things we've kind of noticed is the level of kind of market understanding varies when it comes to behavioral science. You know, some clients are very, very sophisticated when it comes to this stuff. What's the landscape like in the US? You know, is it more of a mature discipline? Do clients get it when you speak to them about this stuff?
It's not a mature discipline. What I often find is a lot of people give lip service to, yeah, we change your customer's behavior. And I guess in theory, we all do that. We've always done that. It's instinctive as part of the business with how we actually work. But people who actually have a discipline in behavior modeling to make that happen are very few and far between. And so it's an accepted practice, particularly when you weave behavioral economics into it. But I've not seen a lot of people with real depth of experience in it. Like I can think of a half a dozen to a dozen agencies that I would go like, oh yeah, they know what they're doing. And so I have found that because I do a lot of international keynote speaking, I've seen that sort of around the world that people will talk about it. And to a certain degree, it's true that they do change customer behavior. I just haven't seen people with the real science behind those actions. So,
what frightens me with behavioral science is like the fact that the frameworks that we've got. I mean, they're used for propaganda and things like that. I mean, propaganda in the worst case scenario. But now that we've got the mythos and these AI tools that could be used for AI hacking, but it could equally be used for human hacking in behavioral science. You would think it would be a way around to convince people to do things. Is that fair?
I actually don't think it's all that fair, Chris, because yeah, the AI can provide disinformation and misinformation to an abundant degree. But the thing about human behavior is that, well, look, there's a couple of maxims that I learned from my mentor, Dr. BJ Fogg. The first one is you cannot manipulate people. I can't make anybody through behavioral science and economics do anything they do not want to do. You know, if you, like, I ride bikes and I love cycling, and 100-kilometer ride on a Saturday for me is not a big deal. But if you, you know, if you wanted to work for me, if you had some level of motivation, like, oh, maybe I should go ride with Roger. If you don't like riding bikes, I can never get you to go ride a bike, particularly over 100 kilometers. It's just never going to happen. So you can't manipulate people into doing something they don't have any inclination or any level of motivation to do. Now, if disinformation or misinformation is persuading someone to take a certain action, that means there's an existing motivation there. But pure manipulation, that's not true. The other thing about behavioral science is it helps people do what they already want to do. Oftentimes, people are motivated to do something, but they lack the ability to do that. There's some barrier in the way. There's these ability blocker chain where it might cost too much money, take too much mental effort or physical effort, or it's not in their routine, right? And what we'll do is, how do we overcome those blockers and increase someone's ability? So AI really can't do that. It can help me communicate more effectively, particularly when AI has context to it. But AI is just putting out content, and content is what happens, not why something is happening. And context is everything. So tap into the context, and then you shift behavior.
It's interesting. I spoke to a lot of behavioral scientists, like Will said, but I've spoke to a couple in America that Will hasn't met, and they were talking about, like, you've got the various different elements of behavioral science, like scarcity and then abundance. So there's numerous different traits that you can push on to make to like you say, though, it's more to encourage someone to do something rather than someone who doesn't want to do something.
Sure, but like those are more behavioral economic stuff. So if someone has enough motivation or motivational range to do something, and we've identified them as an audience, now how do I increase their behavior? How do I increase the propensity for them to change behavior by making anything easier, increasing their ability? That could be, hey, on the website, there shouldn't be 5 fields, there should be 2, right? That can be an inducement for trial. That can be, let's do some behavior sequencing and have them perform 4 or 5 behaviors before we ask them to sign on for a subscription. There's a lot of things that you can do. Once you identify those things, now behavioral economics kicks in, and you're like, okay, do I use messaging from the rule of scarcity? Like, this is going to be going away at the end of the month, or there's only a limited number of packages. For some people, that will spur that motivation into action. For other people, it could be reciprocity, or, just that whole fear of missing out. Or we'll use things like middle tier pricing to show people the value of something by using an anchor price. So the behavioral economic theory overlaps that behavioral science, and it gives you a way to message your audience on something they already want to do that can make it easier for them to take action. But if they don't want to do that, I can't make anybody do that. Like, I can't make you, Chris, go ride a 100-kilometer bike ride with me.
No, true. And one of the things I really like one of the hacks that I heard was, like, if you were doing pricing, right? So we spoke to Phil Agnew, and he runs a podcast in the UK called Nudge, and he said that if you do pricing and you've got say your fee is £6,000, instead of doing £6,000, do 6K. And even though it's exactly the same amount, your mind says that 6,000 is more than the 6K. Or be specific was another one on the number, and clients are more likely to pay a particular amount if it's a specific number. It feels like it's been more thought through. So rather than being £6,000, 5,333 is much more convincing.
There are all kinds of pricing strategies. That's why a lot of things here are like $9.99, because even though it's $10 in the US, it still comes across as $9. So we have a tendency to round down. We have the tendency to give people credit. One of the pricing strategies is premium pricing. So in premium pricing in behavioral economics, what you want to do is actually have a round number. You want to charge £6,000 for something because it sounds like, yeah, we're expensive, but we're worth it, right? There's a value to it. If you want to do something that feels like, there's a lot of specificity to this number because it was really thoughtful, yeah, then you're going to end in actually an odd number. Yeah. If you ever get a chance, I would recommend looking at Costco's pricing strategy because the price reflects the logistics of their operations. So
amazing piece.
And I can't remember what the pricing things were, but I'm going to make this up to make a point. But if something's like 67, ends in 67, they only have a few left and they're just trying to get rid of it. If it ends in 99, it's new product. If it ends in 88, it's something else. So they have a whole pricing structure around how they handle inventory management. But there are a lot of ways to price things. It's not just make it 5,999 pounds and it's the same as 6,000, or 6K versus, 6,000 pounds. Those are strategies, but they're just not the only ones.
So you're obviously a published author. We love having authors on the show, and I want to dive into that a little bit. So you wrote a book on all of this stuff, didn't you? Was it 2024 when you? Yeah,
it came out in June of 2024, and working on the second book now. But yeah, it's called Outthink, Outperform.
Yeah, so talk to us about the focus of that, and then I'd love to dive into what the new book's going to be about, because that's going to that kind of touches on AI, doesn't it? Which is obviously AI in your field. But yeah, tell us a little bit about Outthink, Outperform.
Well, I don't recommend anyone going out and writing a book, and I didn't do that either. I wrote some blogs, and then I wrote some articles for Forbes as a guest contributor, and then I got a collection of those and went, there's a lot of material here. There's like 20,000 words, which is like half a book, or 1/3 of a book. And it was along that time period that I had enough friends saying, I can't, I don't have the budgets to go to an agency like Off Madison Ave. There's a lot of small business owners that are just starting out. Is there application of how you can apply this stuff yourself? Can you teach what some of these behavioral science, behavioral economic theories are in a digestible, sort of very understandable way? And enough of my friends over about a 2 or 3 year period said that to me, to where I started then organizing this. I got actually a writing coach, not to actually help me with the writing, but to help me with the book organization. How do you outline? How do you, make sure it flows logically? And even then, I decided I wasn't going to write a book. I decided I was going to write a chapter. And after one chapter, it wasn't linearly, like I didn't write chapter 1, then chapter 2, and then chapter 3. I think the first chapter I wrote was like the 3rd or 4th chapter. And then I wrote chapter 1. Yeah, I wrote chapter, yeah, exactly. It's like a Star Wars thing. Yeah. I wrote chapter 1 like really late in the process. And I didn't write the last sentence of the book until like the day before I left for vacation. It was literally like, that's when I named the book. It was literally in the last sentence when I wrote the book. I had a different working title for 9-10 months. And when I wrote the last sentence in the book, I was like, oh shit, yeah, that's the title. Like we should make that the title. Again, if we talk about behavioral science, and I talked about behavioral sequencing earlier, when it comes to the book writing process, it's the same thing. If you look at writing a book, that's a large behavior. That's something that a lot of people can't tackle because it's just too difficult. It just feels too overwhelming. But if you break it down into a series or sequencing of behaviors, like, you know what? I'm just going to write a blog. I'm going to write 2 blogs. I'm going to write 500 words today or 50 words today. It doesn't really matter. Pretty soon, those behaviors add up to where you're looking at a manuscript of 30, 40,000 words. And you're like, okay, now I need to fill in the blanks. And if you can hit between 40 and 50,000 words, that's typically a business book. I know some publishers are like, I want 75,000 words. Anything under 40, it feels a little thin. Like you're maybe not have the same level of expertise unless you're trying to do here's a 50-page manual on how to do these 10 things. But yeah, that's the process I went through. And if someone does want to write a book, I would argue, don't write a book, go start writing some of these other things and build on it. And at some point you might feel like, oh my God, there's a book here.
Or start a podcast about people's mistakes.
Well, I was just thinking, Chris, we could write a book based on the interviews and the insights we've had.
Yeah, I've thought about it, because the amount of words that we've got in our back catalogue is ridiculous.
what was it like releasing it into the wild, Roger? You know, you obviously you named it. You went on vacation. Were you exhausted? Was there an enormous sense of satisfaction?
Well, there was a moment where I got really, there was a moment in between before it got released. I was exhausted because here's the thing about writing a book. When I got done, literally I wrote the last sentence the day before I went on this Mediterranean cruise with some friends. And I was like, done, right? Just done. I'm done. Like, this weight's off my shoulders. It's awesome. And I get back from the content editor, who's a really talented journalist at one, he's a very talented journalist, but also now does content editing. A guy by the name of Dan Good. He had sent me an email because I knew he was doing the first pass at content editing. And it took me 2 days to open up the email because I was so bloody nervous about like what this person was going to do and how he was going to rip apart my book. And the first sentence was, Roger, you have an excellent book that's clearly written for the reader. And I was like, oh my God, like this is amazing. Like I was almost in tears. What I was not prepared for at that moment was the shift into the publishing world. Content edit. Then it was like a citation edit. There was like 2 different edits of Chicago style, which I didn't even know there was a Chicago style of editing. I knew of AP. Right? It took the same amount of time to get the book into the wild as it did to write the book. And I was not prepared for that. And I've had a lot of people ask me this question, like, what should you do? Like, what's one thing you need to tell people as advice? Have a spreadsheet. Because there's so many little things that you have to do in the process beyond writing in terms of how do I get who's going to write the forward? How do I have like a book army of people who can endorse the book and see an advanced copy? How do I get it into the Library of Congress in the United States? How do I get it into all the public libraries? How do I make sure I have the copyright? Like there's all these things and all this paperwork that you have to do that that was as much work as writing the book. But when it did come out well, to your question, yeah, I was elated. I couldn't believe it. I was like all giggles and ears. But you don't write a book to sell it, in all honesty, a business book at least. It wasn't about like how many sales can I get. For me, it's a proof point for my companies.
Yeah.
How I use this behavioral science and validate. And honestly, then was speaking opportunities. And 2 or 3 weeks after the book came out, I was very fortunate to get an email from a marketing director very high up at Tata in Mumbai. And honestly, when I got the email, it kind of read to me like Nigerian prince needs help because I was like, I never heard of this company. Like I never heard of this person. I looked him up on LinkedIn. And so I reached out and I said, yeah, sure, I'd be interested. And he said, let's get on a Zoom call. So he gets on a Zoom call, says, yeah, we're having a summit of our CMOs. We work in like 150 countries. We have operations in 100 of them. We're across like 9 sectors. Like Tata's a $4 billion company. It's massive. And I didn't realize it at the time. But the moment for me that was the most proud, because this has to really do with releasing the book. I'm just, this guy in Arizona. And when I asked Phuket, who's the gentleman I was speaking with, how'd you get a hold of me? And he said, well, my boss has a background in behavioral economics from Wharton, and he read your book, and then he held it up. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, that's pretty, like, that was my proud, incredible moment. And then it just snowballed into a whole bunch of other speaking gigs because
Are we allowed to talk about the big one that's coming up?
Yeah, you can. I have a working title, and I don't mind throwing that out there. So
that's TEDx, isn't it?
Yeah. So yes, I literally came back a few days ago from doing a TEDx in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and I think I could give away the title because it's not that big of a deal. It is Stop Following the Blue Line, and it has to do with how human behavior works with AI and how we need to work with it in a way that just doesn't provide answers, but expands our thinking, expands our options. And then we apply judgment to those answers and let AI accelerate that distance. And that the TEDx actually didn't start. And then the book, I had this idea from just writing an AI philosophy for my company. So it was just like, oh, my employees, like, you can have an AI policy, and sure, that's all the legalese stuff. But I wrote an AI philosophy that explained to my staff, here's how you need to work with AI. You know, you can experiment all you want, but here's what doesn't replace the human thinking. Here's what doesn't replace judgment. Here's how you accelerate the quality of our work with AI. That document I ran by the person who helped me write the first book, with my writing coach, Isabella Talbot. And she goes, this is a book. And I'm like, really? I go, why don't we just start off with a blog? And then why don't we do another blog, right? And then I got approached by someone to set out an application for a TEDx about it. And then they said, oh yeah, when you do these things, it's going to take 6-7 months. It took 6 weeks. And I accepted that invitation, and then I wrote that TEDx script. And then it was really, at that point, it's like, oh my God, we're in the middle of it. So now I'm in the middle of writing that book. I only have a couple of chapters done. I've got the outline done. I'm working on it a little bit in my spare time. It's going to be called, I think it's going to be called Outcompete, on that same theme of Outthink, Outperform, how to compete with AI. But it's not competing against it. It's competing with it as a double entendre. Okay. And it's going to be beyond business. It's going to have parenting advice. It's going to be for anybody using AI, not just people in marketing and public relations or in business in general.
So just diving back to your AI philosophy, I really like the sound of that. And I've not heard of that before, because everyone churns out their AI policies, don't they? And that's a long list of very formal, structured ways to work with AI and declare its usage. So what does an AI, give us a few pointers, without giving it away necessarily, but, what are some of the things you included in your AI philosophy, and what's the kind of the reason for having an AI philosophy?
So, a couple of reasons for having AI philosophy. One is to teach my staff how I want them to use AI, because I don't want anyone who works for me to simply say, okay, here's the research, throw it into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you have, and here's the report it spits out. Take it verbatim, without judgment, without query, without expanding options, without looking for unrealized opportunities, and just give it to a client. That would be disingenuous. That would be terrible for us. It'd be terrible for the client. The second part of that is, you probably have come across this too, and I still have companies and WorldCom partners even talk about this. We have a client there's no AI. I'm like, okay. You're living with your head in the sand like an ostrich here. You have to use AI. You're in a world now where you cannot not use it. Now, you may not want to use it for output, but that does not mean you can't use it for input. You can't use it to look for gaps, right? Or streamline the process for something. That doesn't mean that makes it into what gets output to a journalist in terms of a press release or creative. I get that part of it, but to have a blanket like we don't allow AI in our work you're going to be outmaneuvered and cornered by your competitors in a very, very short order. So the philosophy was, you never look for AI for an answer. I want you to look for AI to expand your options. So don't say, give me, you might ask it a question like, look through all of this research and tell me the results. If I were to go and choose this action, what are possible outcomes? Right? You're asking questions that provide content to the context that you have in your head, or you're helping provide context to that AI, and then you're never allowing it to replace your judgment. So it can give you all the possibilities, but ultimately at the end of the day, you have to choose the red pill or the blue pill. Sorry, Matrix reference.
That's interesting, but I'm going to throw a complete curveball here, because every client has got a different take. So we're seeing in the UK that we've got at Prohibition, we've probably got 30, 40 clients, something like that. And every client is completely, sectors are different. So some clients are, you can't use AI. Some clients are like, we've got clients that are going to be like, hey, can you use AI for this just to speed this up? And then we had one of our account directors not 3 months ago, two months ago, before I went to the AI conference and PR in London. I was at a few weeks ago. I shared this. One of my account directors rung me whilst we were in Paris, actually, whilst we were in Paris with you, Roger. I got a phone call and they said, I've just been asked by a marketing director. The marketing director has sat me down and gone, we've started using Claude and it's really good. Why don't we just use Claude to create all the output at our end, and then we'll just send you the stuff we've got, and you just send it out to your contacts. To which we were obviously you can imagine what my account director said, and she was like, and then she, obviously, and I saw what I did at this conference was I threw that out to the panel and said, what would you say to that when a client says, oh, I'll just outsource all the output to which is exactly the opposite of what you just said, which is interesting.
Yeah.
My point is that you get different people with different views on it, very different views on it.
Well, let me answer the first. Let me answer your last question first, and then I'll address how that went about. I would probably say to that person, we're probably not the right agency for you. Look, there's always going to be bad actors. There's always going to be people who are looking for shortcuts. And you're going to have that person who's a solopreneur, one person real estate agent, who's just going to use a Claude, crank out an ad, crank out a press release, send it, and they don't care. It's just content that's going out in the world. That does not mean there's depth of thinking. That does not mean they're looking at unrealized opportunities or looking for gaps. That doesn't mean they're not trying to expand their thinking. Companies that are more sophisticated, that want to truly have market share and set themselves up with points of differentiation, aren't going to rely on the first answer out of ChatGPT. So they're just never going to be a client. I just won't take them. And in terms of a philosophy document, because you're talking about some specifics, our philosophy document doesn't say we do this with it or we do that with it. Like, it says, this is how we work with AI. We use it to expand those options. We do not let it replace judgment. We use it to find gaps. We'll use it to comb through mountains of research that it would take way too long and be made cost prohibitive for us to do by hand, so that we can synthesize those answers in a way that we can apply our own judgment to it and look for additional opportunities. So a philosophy document is, again, I think, lean hard on the word philosophy. It is not specificity, right? We're not saying, oh, we use it to create an ad at this stage, right? Or we use it to create the writing of a press release or even a draft of a press release. We never talk about that. We may not. It's the context around how we use AI that's the philosophy document.
This kind of unscrutinized, uncritiqued use of AI. I don't know about you, but I'm seeing quite a lot of that, and we're seeing briefs come in. Half of the new briefs we get in from companies that should know better are purely written with AI. You can tell they've not been scrutinized at all. We've identified AI copy on one of the major ad magazines in the UK come through on an email, and I think it's pretty widespread at the moment. Is this? I know there's a term you use, expensive sameness. Is this what we're talking about here?
Yeah, but any new technology does that, Will. I mean, any new technology that's a disruptor, it usually runs through two industries first, pornography and music. And once it gets past that, it goes into people that try to take shortcuts or do nefarious stuff with it. And once you get past that group of people, and we're still in that group of people right now, you're going to have people who understand this technology, can be incredibly powerful, and use it in ways that we never thought of. I mean, the desktop computer was like that. IBM's like, why do people need a computer on their desk? Right? They didn't understand that the future is, in our time frame that we're in right now, the future doesn't belong to people who use AI the fastest. It belongs to people who use it the deepest, right? The ones who question more, the ones who don't have it replace their judgment. There's a place in the world for AI, just like there's a place in the world for calculators and computers, and they replace the side rule and the abacus and all those other things. We're adopting a new technology, and we're going through the growing pains of adoption of that new technology. But at the end of that, if everybody has the same tool, who's the better person? It's the person who thinks better with it, and not the person who just looks for output.
How long have we got to go then? How much more pain have we got to get through before we get to that point?
If I had that answer, I would be a gazillionaire, I think.
Yeah, it's a few more months yet, I reckon.
But yeah, I don't think there's an answer there because the technology is developing so rapidly. It's hard to keep up,
Yeah, I was just saying there's a whole PR campaign going on at the moment where it's swapped from doomism to positivity again because of all the negative sentiment around these data centers popping up everywhere, springing up, and Sam Altman and all the owners, that they're all now going, oh, actually the jobs market, it might not be that bad, it might be fine. And like going, really? If self-automating, self-improving tools, so when that happens, that's the game changer. As soon as it starts self-modifying itself, that's when everything will change. But we're not there yet. So we're not at the singularity.
No. Yeah, I mean, when that singularity happens, who knows? I mean, maybe then we'll be in a world of Star Trek where, we can just improve our lives and have technology handle everything. I have hope for this reason. Like right now, AI does not like being trained by AI. So if you're looking at GEO or AEO research and how the LLMs are handling search right now, you know what? You can identify the prompts that are happening. You can use AI to dive all that research down. You can even use AI to draft, hey, here are the gaps in order for us to improve for our client, where they're going to show up in either answers and or citation. But at some point, you as a human has to write the press release because AI does not want the press release written by AI. It does not want to be trained by AI. And maybe that's just the powers that be inside all those LLM companies like Anthropic putting guardrails on stuff. Who knows? But I am a believer in human thought and understanding the human condition. And at the end of the day, there was this quote by Joanna, and I cannot remember her last name. It's going to be in my book. I don't want AI to do my painting and writing. I want it to do my dishes and laundry so that I can do my painting and writing. And I'm hoping that becomes the future.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that. Yeah. Because the writing is the creative side that people enjoy.
When are you hoping this second book's going to be published, Roger?
It's evergreen because it has to do with human thinking. And so I'm not worried about it being like, oh my God, I get this out because it's about AI. It's about our evolution with it. And it's a futurist point of view. So I'm not like under some sort of pressure deadline. I would like to see the book done. And here's the thing, compared to my last book, which I wrote literally every word by myself, like without help. I am actually going to use AI to prove the point that you can work with AI in a really impactful way. So I do expect it to be written faster because of that. And I'm starting to see the advantages of that just because of the way I've trained the agent, the way I'm writing. It's still my stories, my ideas, speaking into a computer and having it help me organize. So I would love to have it finished by the end of this year. And then if it comes out by the end of next year, it's probably the publishing world just takes a long time to get through all that stuff. So I would definitely like it to come out next year sometime.
It's an expensive sameness reference that you've used that I think Will talked about earlier. Expensive sameness. Are you talking about the fact that everybody will be producing stuff using the same tools, so everything will be vanilla, so all the same, but you've paid a lot of money to do it? Is that the point you're making with that?
No, what I'm saying is that if AI is an equalizer for people who are smart and for people who are stupid, then you need to have some other element that makes someone better than the other person. You guys have employees, right? Someone comes into your organization, or you've got two employees, both with the same number of years experience, basically the same background, and they have the same access to AI tools, who's the better person? Yeah, it's going to be the one who asks the better questions, because the person who just, throws everything into ChatGPT and then puts out this very confident, polished report, even if it's wrong, is not the valuable person. It's the person who comes back with that messier document, the handwritten notes in the margins, the person who's like, hey, I didn't like these couple of answers, so I dug deeper and I went back to the research and I found this, that it didn't flag. And that's the person who's going to be the critical thinker. And that's the person you want to invest in. And in a few years, those two groups of people, they're not going to be the same place in any organization. One's just getting answers, but the other one, again, is expanding the thinking, expanding the options and applying judgment.
And I suppose those people would always, those curious people that ask the right questions, are driven, they, irrespective of when they practiced in their profession, pre-AI, post-AI, they're always going to rise to the top, aren't they? Whatever technology they've got at their means, that's going to get them far, isn't it, that attitude?
Yeah, but I mean, you don't want someone who just mindlessly pumps out a press, before AI, you wouldn't want someone who mindlessly pumps out a press release, crosses the T's, dot line, hands it in without critical thinking behind it. It's just, AI has just removed those social barriers, that social friction, and the ethics, quite frankly, to, accelerate bad behavior.
It's a tricky, back to this transitionary period we're in, it's tricky, isn't it? Because at the moment, there is a clear advantage of people that use AI, irrespective of how critical they're thinking. So it gives them an immediate kind of leg up, doesn't it? Just by virtue of using it. But obviously that, sooner or later, it's going to be a level playing field again.
Yeah, it will. I mean, we're definitely in a danger zone. There was some research by Stephen Shaw and Gideon Nave of the Wharton School earlier this year. I think it came out in like January or February. And they were building on Daniel Kahneman's work on System 1 and System 2 thinking. And they were talking about System 3. And there's components to it, right? There's cognitive offloading, which is like, I don't want to go through all this research. Just go through it and give me what it says so that I can make some judgments. That's fine. Or there's this other element called cognitive surrender that they identified, where, you just default to have it think for you because you don't do it anymore. And, my point in another podcast interview was that's always been around. AI didn't create that, right? Plagiarism is real. People took credit for someone else's idea all the time. You either copied work and put your name on it, or a manager took credit for your work, or, even when a child says, how do you spell X, or what's the answer to this? And the parent just freely gives them that answer. That kid is not critical thinking. That kid is not trying to figure it out for themselves. They're just cognitively surrendering. Like, I don't want to deal with that. And again, fine. It's a useful element if you're trying to figure out who won the 1994 World Cup. I think it was Brazil. And you're in a pub with somebody and, you just need that. That's perfectly good. Not good in business, not good for thinking. So in their research, they said, look, that whole cognitive surrender isn't just, common today. It's actually the dominant force shaping how people use AI. That's like my fear, is that because it's a new tool, people are just accepting the answers that come out of it, even if they're wrong.
True.
And they're reporting higher degrees of confidence. Like, that's a danger zone that we as business owners, as leaders in our industry, have to make sure that people are actually applying real critical thinking skills to their use of AI. And I think that's our responsibility to teach that, because they're not getting it growing up the way we did.
Yeah, but I'm in the LinkedIn dichotomy right now. So LinkedIn has is the center of all B2B communication, social media, brilliant. And that 3 or 4 years ago, when Microsoft bought it, it seemed to really find a way of its own. Then AI, ChatGPT's come out and they've integrated AI into the paid side of it. So you have been able to use it for the last couple of years, where if you're writing a post, you're a premium user, you can use AI to help improve your post or write your post. And then, was it last week or the week before, they've launched a button now to, does this look like AI? or this is AI slop. There's a new button to report AI slop. Well, the dichotomy here is you want people to create posts with AI, but then you're saying it's AI slop. I would argue, I think about 90% of LinkedIn is now AI bullshit. Don't you think so?
I do think there's a tremendous amount of AI BS in LinkedIn. I also think that there's an evolution in LinkedIn's thinking or Microsoft's thinking is that, hey, AI is a thing. We're going to make it easier for you. And now there's a backlash. Now that we've made it easier for you and AI doesn't want to be trained by AI, now we need you to help us police the fact that we made a mistake. Again, I think we're turning a corner there. Quality thinking is quality thinking. Like, here's a test I give my employees. And I said it when we were in Paris together at that conference. But for your listeners, I'll have an employee come in and I'll ask them to write something with AI. And then I'll ask them, have AI write something for you. But the third one is trickier. I want you to write a page on something AI cannot possibly write. There's no way in the world AI could write this for you. And it shows me, yeah, can you actually write? Like, can you write in active voice versus passive voice and do all the grammar stuff? It teaches me how you think. Can you track an idea through? Right? And I've had people be like, AI can write anything. I'm like, no, AI cannot write anything. AI cannot write about when you were 8 years old making chocolate chip cookies with your grandmother in the kitchen and the feelings and emotions that you had. It doesn't know that story. It's not been trained on that. Therefore, AI can't write it unless you tell it that story. So if you don't tell it that story, you can easily pick up a pen and paper and write it yourself.
Oh my God, I've just got a horrible thought that Elon Musk's going to use that brain chip to download your memories into AI and train it. That's going to be his next thing, isn't it?
Well, at that point, we're all effed, Chris, and we just call it a day. You know, at that point, I'm just going to go on my bike and stop working. You know?
I can't remember what it's called. It's like a chip in the brain, isn't it? He's wired somewhere.
I know. He was trying to do something like that. I know that science fiction can eventually become science fact, but I'm going to just go on. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I will be long gone if that were ever to come to pass.
Well, my final prediction is that, my final prediction on the LinkedIn thing, I predict that LinkedIn AI slot reporting button is going to last less than 2 months because everything on LinkedIn is pretty much AI now. So it'll be interesting to watch that because I've seen people going back the other way to your point, Roger, writing themselves now because it's just like that's now to go back to your sameness point. I think that's the point of difference because everything's AI slop, and if you write yourself, it actually you can see it now. So I think the AI slop button's going to be dead in the water.
I think one of the things that's interesting that AI, I'm not saying AI can't do this. When you can relate the quality of the content to something personal, it's either harder to spot or it's not AI. Or it's done with AI in a respectful, correct way. And I was just writing an article, and when I was doing it with my writing assistant, not AI, real person, I explained that you had to do this audience evaluation thing, like you're scuba diving. And she goes, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, when I was trained to scuba dive in my first open water certification." If you go down as you're descending, the pressure builds up in your ears, and you have to equalize. You have to basically hold your nose and blow out your nose, or to make sure that you also like get air in your mask, right? Yeah. You got to pressurize so that your eardrums don't burst. And if you go down a little too much pain, you got to come up a little bit, equalize, wait, and then start to descend again. So I said the phrase they drill into your head is early and often. And I said, so when it comes to the audiences that you have, they may shift because of external pressures, geopolitics, the economy, and they can shift underneath your feet. And that means you might have to offer different services or expand the audience set or do something. And a lot of times people wait until that spreadsheet shows the line going down a little too far. Oh my God, we're 20% under quarter over quarter. What's happening? If you go early and often to evaluate those audiences, you might mitigate that. But the thing is, like in writing the article, I don't know if AI would have on its own made that correlation of scuba diving to audience evaluation. That took human thought. That took human judgment.
It will do now that we've discussed it, and it's
it will now. Yeah, this will get uploaded, and it'll be like, yeah. I'm gonna see a LinkedIn article, Chris, next week that says, you should handle whatever early and often.
Yeah, exactly that. Obviously, this show's about mistakes, Roger, and that everybody on the listens to this show wants to hear where people have screwed up and what they've learned from it. So, what's a mistake that you've made that you are willing to share on the show? To be, honest. That's what we're here for.
I'm willing to share a lot of them because I've made so many. I'm trying to figure out which one might give you the best lesson for your listeners. It's funny. I've had a lot of people say to me over the years, because you mentioned like my company's been around for 27 years now. It's like, wow, must do everything right. Like, they'll say some version of that. I'm like, no, I get a lot of things wrong. I do get things more right than wrong. And if you can do that 10% better, like if you can get things 10% right more than wrong, you're a success. Like, so it doesn't take a lot. I'll give you one story that happened recently. I started to discuss this a little bit in Paris at WorldCom, but we as a company made a massive mistake hiring somebody who was just toxic to the culture. And it ended up being a case where we weren't getting business because of this person. We had some good people like punch out, some of them without notice. And it just took a lot of growing pains to realize that this was a mistake and to get everybody on page to see that it was a mistake and start to take corrective action. So the lesson I learned here is that, and again, every company's different. My father had this saying, that's what's good for one marriage is poison for another. What I realized for my company, and I think for a lot of companies, this makes a lot of sense. When you're looking to grow and change, I don't know if I would bring in somebody new, particularly somebody who really doesn't understand the culture. I would rather groom people who've been with me for years, understand who we are and why we work the way we do, and find ways to get them into leadership positions to grow the company. So I will not make that mistake again.
I think everybody's any business owner has recruited a toxic member or two before. It's how you learn. I mean, you just said there that you've made more mistakes. You've made more. You do 10% more success than mistakes. And actually, that's what life is in business. That's what life is.
Yeah.
Marketing itself, anything you do in marketing, is do something, fail, do something, fail, iteratively improve it, do something, fail. They call it A/B testing now, but basically it's A/B fucking up. That's what it is, isn't it?
It is that.
Version Z, and it's doing okay.
Yeah, the culture thing is really important, Chris, and we do make those mistakes. And honestly, my advice for the listeners would be, it doesn't have to be a leadership person. It could be literally the lowest person on the rung inside your organization, that kid that comes out of college. One bad apple ruins the cart or something like that, I think the saying is. Yeah, it can happen. One person who's toxic can really change the organization. And I would rather have someone who's a lesser of a performer, but fits in culturally, than a high performing person who's toxic.
Well, luckily Will's changed a bit now. He's not as toxic as he was when he started. So. Oh God!
I mean, that's so true. I remember I read I used to subscribe to Seth Godin's daily wisdom, which was just absolute gold, and he addressed that once, that you should never compromise on culture ever, because you'll pay for it every single time. And it's absolutely true, isn't it? And I don't think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Was it Jim Collins? I think in Good to Great. I think it was that book where he wrote that culture eats strategy for lunch or something like that.
Right, yeah.
But
yeah, absolutely. I think we've got time for one more mistake, Roger, without wishing to push you too far. If you've got anything else you have to share, you shared a few in the pre-show.
Okay, I'll give you an AI one.
Oh, good.
Because it's like 2 or 3 years ago, like AI really wasn't a thing. Although I had started an AI company that was machine-based learning and eventually went to ontology-based learning after ChatGPT. People think of just the LLMs as like, oh, we've got Claude, we've got, ChatGPT, and I can't remember Microsoft's Copilot, right? There's Gemini, there's Perplexity. People think there's a handful of these things. There's not. There's tens and tens and tens of thousands of AIs out there. Everyone thinks they've got a better mousetrap. And we made the mistake of trying to build a kind of an enterprise AI for our company when all this was happening the last couple of years. And I'm not saying companies shouldn't do that. This is not the lesson. What I'm saying is that you need to evaluate if it's cheaper to rent than buy. That's not our core competency, right? After it failed, we found something else that was off the shelf that we can customize for the way we work, far cheaper than trying to build something, maintain something. And again, if that works for your company, that's great. But I think that's the exception. Like, I know that you guys have a software for your thing, and that works great. Now, whether or not you want to sell that and try to create something else, that's a different story. And I think a lot of people have these grandiose ideas that, I'm going to build the next AI. It's a gold rush for AI. And so I'm just going to quote Mark Twain. In a gold rush, it better be the guy who sells picks and shovels. So let everyone have the gold rush trying to build stuff. I'm going to be the guy with the picks and shovels, using what's already there and finding ways to leverage it in ways that no one else is doing.
Unfortunately, that guy is NVIDIA, isn't it? The guys that are making all the bloody chips that everybody, every single AI company needs the bloody chip. That's why Apple's going up, PlayStations are going up, NVIDIA are just raking it in. They're like that with the dollar bills. Come on, keep up.
Who's the there's the guy from Harrogate, isn't there, which is your hometown, who's just become an AI chip billionaire. He's like a high school dropout. He's like 25 years old. He's at the Sunday Times, right? Yeah.
To that point, some people have given Apple criticism for like not investing in building out their own LLM the way, I'm thinking like, wow, I actually think that's pretty smart. Apple's going to sit back, let all of you people spend trillions of dollars trying to duke this out. I don't need 5 LLMs in my life, just like I don't need 5 web browsers. I need like 2, maybe 3 at the top. So they're going to sit back, they're going to wait, and when the dust settles, they're going to come in and say, we're going to include your AI into our system, and here's how we're going to make money on it. And they're never going to invest the trillions of dollars that everyone else is. I actually think that's a pretty smart strategy, and I think that's a lesson a lot of us can learn in business.
It's the classic Betamax VHS war that we're in right now, and you're right. And a few of them are going to back out, I think, because the Chinese models and there's a couple of Indian models. They're much cheaper. They cost much less, and they're getting quite close to the frontier models. That's why I just find this chasing to be quickest, fastest, and actually we're going to get to a point where good is, the exceptional is very exceptional, but also really expensive. And good is good enough for 90% of people. It will do all the scheduled tasks, agentic stuff that everybody wants. And so you're right. And it's one of the reasons why Microsoft is diversifying in Copilot. It was all in with ChatGPT and OpenAI, and now it's brought Claude in, and it's going to bring in the others. And what Copilot is going to try and become is like the overhanging fruit that then picks which model. So if Claude goes down, how many businesses are fucked if Claude goes down today for 24 hours?
Oh, yeah.
A lot. Do you know what I mean? There's going to be a lot of people going. So Microsoft, that's if someone can find that panacea, like what you've just said there, the Apple, where they could have 17 different models, and it just selects the bit in between, selects whichever model is best at writing or brainstorming, and you don't have to use one. But you're right. At the end, it will come down to like 1 or 2. And also, on the final note,
one or two for the LLMs.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there won't be 10,000 AIs.
Oh yeah, of course.
Because there's going to be specialty AIs that just do this very specific thing. I don't think that's going away. I just, in terms of search, I don't need 5 or 6 of them.
I know it's a bit annoying because I've got about 4, and I'm still just you're just constantly testing this. Then one gets better than the other one, and it's like a space race.
Right. Well, unless someone does something unethical and I won't name which AI I think has done something unethical. And so I
They've all
literally
done
deleted
something
it.
unethical.
I canceled the account. I'm like, all right, you know what? This is a line in the sand for me. I don't need to use this AI anymore because what I'm using is, I think, far superior.
Well, you did well to can that project, Roger, before you spent $1 trillion in developing your own AI. Often it's knowing when to quit, isn't it? Rather than just, which is another theme actually that has come across time and again on this pod, is people having the courage and confidence to know when to quit, and that's not a failure. It's just rather than throwing good money off, bad money after good, or whatever the phrase is.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to win.
If I were a billionaire, but Jensen Huang, he's selling the picks and shovels. He's not developing the AI. This is like he's perfectly aligned with Mark Twain. Everyone's fighting for trying to build a model. He's like, let me sell you the picks and shovels to get you there. That's all the video is.
But that's why they're the most expensive company in the world all of a sudden. Literally came from nowhere. Well, not literally from nowhere, but one minute you'd not heard of them, and next minute they're like, "Oh, they're right at the top of the stock market and the world's biggest company." And because they're selling picks and shovels.
Shut up. But that doesn't mean there's not room for AMD or Taiwan Semi. There's going to be other chip companies. They'll eventually catch up and do some things. Like right now, it's a gold rush, and they have the picks and shovels, and everyone else is trying to mine. I just don't need to mine. I'll just rent them.
Well, Roger, you've been on the show now. You've experienced the questioning and the storytelling. But we always have one question for our guests, and that is, now that you've been on the show, if you were us, who would you have on the show next and why?
Well, Jensen Huang.
That's aiming high. He was on Joe Rogan 3 months ago, but I'll try.
So here's the person I would have on the show. She's an American citizen. She's got dual citizenship. Her name is Key Zhang McCarthy. It's like QIZHAI McCarthy. She is a psychologist, and she also did a TEDx talk with me in Kuala Lumpur. She lives in Singapore, and what she spoke about was, even in the world of AI, the human-to-human relationships are really what are critical for success. And I found her talk to be fascinating and incredibly insightful. And I think she expresses an element of being human that is easily overridden by our pursuit of AI.
Fantastic.
Amazing. That's exactly what Will and I talk about. Is our philosophy at our agency is, I think the future is human relationships and one-on-one, and actually being in the room with your own creative thoughts and ideas, and using the AI stuff to do the boring admin shit that none of us want to do, and making sure that we build the relationships and strengthen our relationship. That's where the future is, and it always was. Sitting around a campfire and making jokes and drinking beer together. Okay.
I would be happy to make an email introduction to she.
That'd be lovely if you could. That'd be great. We'd love to get her on the show. Also, if people want to get hold of you to use your behavioral science skills, where can they find you other than Googling your book name?
Or Googling my name, which does Googling still a thing now with AI? I'm not quite certain.
Tim and I would argue differently.
Yeah. The easiest way to get a hold of me, because I do so many things, is just to go to rogerhurney.com, ROGERHURNI.com. I'm easily found that way, or you can look up Roger Hurney on LinkedIn and connect.